Hello everyone and welcome back along to the channel for another preview of another international weekend of rugby. Now first things first, I do apologise for something a touch bit late, run into a few difficulties getting this one done with too much notice before the weekend, but however we will push on and we will get this done before the matches get underway so you can all look at how bad my picks are, possibly while you're watching the games this weekend. So we're going to have a look at the three tests coming up in the second weekend of the June internationals. Of course, New Zealand hosting Wales in Wellington. Then we have Australia hosting England. That one's in Melbourne. And then, of course, to wrap up the three big ones, South Africa are up against Ireland. That one's in Johannesburg. So, three big matches after the first weekend as well. A lot different to what we thought the stock standard would have happened, and even the odd upset with the Irish at the end of the opening weekend. But let's kick things off on the first match that will be coming up between New Zealand and Wales, and we'll look at the changes, who I think is going to win, of course, ultimately, and if I've got any observations to change following last weekend's matchups. Okay, so New Zealand versus Wales. Now, both the sides have made a couple of changes to head into this second test match. Of course, New Zealand winning the first one 39-21 last weekend. Now, Wales, of course, did play that extra match in between against the Waikato Chiefs, which they got absolutely hammered and carved up by one Stephen Donald in that matchup. Now, the question I ask first and foremost, before we even look at the matchup, is how will that affect Wales heading into this game? Is that going to really put them on a downer and hurt their confidence? And are their heads still up mentally? Are they still in this series? Do they think they can beat the All Blacks after playing so badly against the Chiefs? I mean, players like Jamie Robertson come out through the week and said, you know, they owe the jersey a performance and all that kind of PR rubbish that you hear all the time. The question is, mentally, what state are Wales in by getting smashed in a match they didn't even have to play? So the changes for the home team, Israel Dagg coming into the team. Israel Dagg, now, if you've been following my videos for a while, you know I'm not Israel Dagg's biggest fan, but his form this season has been decent enough. He's experienced, it's his 50th test. Fair enough to give the lad his 50th cap as well, so no real complaints. I just hope he passes it a bit more than we've seen from him when he really tries to prove a point. He does become a bit of a solo individual player. Sure, he's got the ability to break tackles and to cut lines up, but I do hope he still plays as a team member in this All Blacks outfit. He's coming in for Julian Savea, who's making his way out of the starting team. Now, a lot of talk about Savea mentally being bogged down and stuff like that. Really, I just don't think his mind's there. How much does he really want it? A lot of talk about that over the week as well. But he's gone, which means that Ben Smith goes from fullback on to the wing. So he'll be partnering Waisaki Naholo on the two wings. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I really like Ben Smith as just a fullback. If anything, would have you put Israel Dagg on the wing instead? Who's the better fullback? Dagg is, I think, equally as good defensively. He's good under the high ball as well. And I guess we're going to have two fullbacks out there in Ben Smith and Israel Dagg. I'm sure they'll swap around quite a lot throughout the match as well. And ultimately, it could become quite productive. Waisaki Naholo, hopefully he doesn't have to defend high balls as much because he was pretty bad last week as well. The only other change in the All Blacks team is Sam Whitelock coming in for Luke Romano in the second row. Whitelock was injured. Obviously, he is one of the number one starting locks, so he slots straight back in now that he's back ready and fit to go. And that's the only change the All Blacks have come up with. Everything else stayed the same. I'm kind of surprised they didn't have a change at 10 and give Sopoaga a go. You know, and when he's a form player, I don't know if you're really losing much getting rid of Cruden. Cruden was alright. I thought he played decently enough in that opening matchup, but I really want to see Sopoaga have a go in that number 10 jumper, and it really says a lot for Beauden Barrett, who doesn't really look like he's going to get a start in the series whatsoever as he develops more and more into a pretty good impact player off the bench. His speed, when players are starting to tire, is just blistering, and he does make quite an impact, but that competition for the starting number 10, I think, could be really between Cruden and Sopoaga this season. Hopefully, in the third test, we'll see Sopoaga get a start. Now, on the other side of the team news, Wales have been forced into a couple of changes. Most notably is the injury to George North. His tour is now over, which is a real shame because George North is an absolute superstar and was a real impact in that first game. I thought he was one of the best performing players, especially in the backs alongside Liam Williams, the fullback. So, they're going to lose out there. They've brought in Reece Patchell, who is coming on for his first ever start. So, as this works out, Patchell will come in at fullback, and they'll move Liam Williams from fullback to the wing where North was. I thought Liam Williams, as I've said, was outstanding in the first game, so to have him up in the back line 100% of the time in that set play back line is going to be good for Wales. I think having him in the attack is very good for them as well. But the loss of George North, almost irreplaceable for a team like Wales. Plenty of changes going on through their bench as well, with the likes of Anscombe having an injury, and so he's completely out of there. That's brought Reece Priestlin onto the bench as well. And in the second row, another change with Charteris coming in to the second row, replacing Bradley Davies, who goes to the bench and sees Jake Ball go out of the 23. So Wales, if anything, have a few more question marks about their team, but the way they performed against the Chiefs, you've got to say they've got to try something. I think their 23 for their opening match against the All Blacks played pretty well, but that second tier of players just did not perform at all during the midweek. I'm interested to see Patchell. I've seen a lot of him over years coming up through the ranks, when he's a young player. He still is obviously young, but how he's going to affect the international game from fullback, a position he's not really 100% used to either, will be interesting. Liam Williams, I hope he can back up because he's becoming a real attacking threat for the Welsh as well. Overall, I just hope that Wales don't drop their heads in this one. Sure, they've had a bad week, but they're still capable of giving the All Blacks a good run, but ultimately I don't think they're good enough to beat them. Not after the first test. I don't think the All Blacks will ever go back to being that rusty 2 tests in a row. The first test, they're always pretty bad. Second test, they progress. And by the time the series is finished, they'll be 80% to where they want to be. Then they'll get to the Rugby Championship and stuff just changes when it gets to that stage of the season. But for now, I think Wales definitely really might have cooked their chance of getting a win over the All Blacks. For this one, I think New Zealand is going to take it 47-16 over Wales. Yep, I'm picking it to be a bigger margin. I think the Welsh may have cooked their chance. For Game 2 of the weekend, we make our way over to Amy Park in Melbourne for, what I thought would have been the most interesting matchup of Week 2, but really, all of these matchups are still proving to be pretty interesting. There's still a lot we can learn about all 6 of these sides. And Australia, once again, up against England. This one is going to be huge after England comprehensively won the first test between the two sides. Australia have made a number of changes, particularly in their forward pack. Injury, horrible form in the front row especially, has seen some changes. So Slipper coming in for CO, who has just been completely clean dropped right out of the team, just completely gone after that performance in the first weekend. Then we have Kipu coming in for Holmes on the other side of the front row. So that is 2 new props into this pack for Australia. Then we have Carter coming in for Simmons, who has picked up an injury. And of course, last but not least, McMahon coming on for Pocock with that pretty bad eye socket injury, which is going to see him out for a while. They could actually hurt the rest of the teams as well, the likes of the Brumbies, who are going to miss out on having Pocock in their pack. What really interests me about these changes is mostly just the last one. McMahon for Pocock, which means McMahon is going to be coming in at number 8, a position that I haven't seen McMahon play in before. He'll be pretty inexperienced there, and it really is a different role. We know Pocock is a very strong, a power game player, but does McMahon have that same sort of game? On the other hand of things, McMahon is a very good ball disruptor. He's a real out-and-out number 7, good running game on him as well, so he could adapt to that number 8 role to those changes is what's going to be really interesting for McMahon. Otherwise, an unchanged backline for Australia, so they're keeping that same look about it with the big two centres, Karevi and Kurandrani. The wingers, obviously, no real problems for Horn going off. He stayed in the starting team. Liliafano still on the bench, which I don't know too much. I do like Liliafano in the 12 outside Foley with the hard-running Kurandrani at 13. That's the Australia I think is its best, but we saw last week Karevi played very well and does deserve to keep his spot there in a backline that did perform fairly well. It was the forwards where Australia did get completely outclassed by England. And speaking of that, it is interesting when you look on the other side of the field with England, the changes they've made are completely unrelated to their forward pack. So Australia's changing their pack, England is changing their backline, which goes to show the areas that the two sides feel that they did control. So the changes for England see Ford come in for Burrell, Noel coming in for Yard, which is a bit harsh, but really Noel is an out-and-out winger, isn't he? He's an absolute speedster and a finisher. Marlon Yard, the same, but maybe doesn't quite have that X-factor they're looking for to tear a game apart like Noel has. So the change for Ford coming in for Burrell means the two of them obviously swap over, going for a Ford-Farrell 10-12 combo with Farrell moving to 12, obviously to give them that double playmaking option, which is going to be interesting because they really did fall back to that very, very early, making the substitution, taking Burrell off after, was it half an hour or so of that opening test match. It didn't work. Eddie Jones, he's got the balls, he's got the ambition to go out there and make that change almost instantly, and could you say that was the catalyst behind England's big win in the first test. So big changes for both these sides. What is going to happen? That is the big question. Australia's gone with stability up front. England's gone with the changes in a playmaking role in the backline with finishers and X-factor players. What could happen? Who knows? It's going to be another classic matchup, and I think both teams more than capable of winning this matchup. And for my pick for this, I'm going to go with something that will make this series even more exciting. I'm going to go for a Wallaby win, so then we can go to a big decider for matchup number 3. I'm going to go Australia 34, England 30 to just save the series and put it into a third and a final test between these two teams. It could really go either way, and to be completely fair, these two teams play the way that it could be not even close. Australia, England both have the ability to take this game away from the other. All it takes is Australia to get a little bit of dominance in that forward pack, like we've seen in the early stages when they're still in the running. They scored a couple of early tries. If they can play with that pace and that speed that England don't like, and they don't relinquish their grasp, they could easily run away with game number 2, as they could have with game number 1. As for England, it's going to come down to their forward pack, the likes of the big back rowers, Haskell, Atolje, the man in the second row again. They're going to be key, and it's going to come down to the defence, and it's going to be players just making those big plays, those solo individual brilliance, the likes of Watson, the likes of Noel, who will be on the wing. Mike Brown surprises me, he's still there at 15. He played pretty averagely in that first test as well, but he is experienced, and he is one of the best fullbacks when he is on song, which we haven't seen from him in this series just yet. Maybe they've got faith in him, but Alex Good, a bit harsh not to see him starting in the number 15 jumper. Maybe for the third test we'll see him there, but, it's either going to be a decider or it's going to be England taking the series in game number 2. And last but not least, we make our way over to Ellis Park in Johannesburg for South Africa versus Ireland. Now, I thought this was going to be a 3-0, 30-40 point thrashing week in, week out for South Africa, and boy am I happy to be completely wrong about that. Ireland, man in the bin, and they still come away with a 6-point victory last weekend. It was one of the most absorbing matches I've ever watched of rugby, ever. I mean, I don't support South Africa or Ireland. I was a complete 100% neutral in that, but Ireland just played like they were absolutely full of passion and determination like we've never seen before. It was absorbing, and the fact that neither team would really completely take the game away from the other. South Africa were always within a scoring play to get back in the game, back in the lead. back within a couple of points. Ireland, though, they hung on. They desperately clung to every single point, and I hope so much we see that again in the second test. It's easy to say South Africa are just going to walk all over them again, and Ireland are going to, well, Ireland, to their credit, they'll still have a third test to try and win this series and be the first team for 19 years or something like that to win a series in South Africa. That would be absolute massive result for the Irish if they can pull that off. The home team, South Africa, have had 2 changes coming into this matchup. Elton Jantjies gets the start at number 10 in the place of Pat Lambie. And in the second row, another change with Peter Steph de Toit coming in for Lut de Jager in the second row, starting alongside Eben Beef. So that's 2 changes for South Africa. Lambie obviously was playing very well in that first test match until that big hit that ultimately resulted in that red card to CJ Stander, took him out of the game. Jantjies, I think he played all right, but it's a different level to Super Rugby, isn't it? I think he'll be better this week, playing the whole week, knowing that he's going to start at number 10. Obviously, that's going to make a big difference to his preparation, knowing what's going on. The combinations and things like that definitely will be better after that first test and a full week of training as well. South Africa have no option here. They have to win, and they have to play the game that will win them the match. I don't think that's going to be kicking, but I do fear that that is where South Africa are going to go to. They're going to go back to what they know gets some results and what they know that they're good at, which is playing in the forwards and kicking the ball, territorially getting the advantage, and then forcing the other team into the mistake with some punishing defence. It could be the game plan we see from South Africa, but we also know that with the absolute talent in the backline, the likes of Willie Leroux, Peterson on one side, Mapu, De Allende, there's plenty of players who can tear a game to absolute shreds. Are we going to see that game from South Africa is the big question. On the other side of things, for Ireland, the team that actually won in week 1, they have made a whole host of changes. Now, if ever I thought I would be saying you don't change a winning team, it would be a game like this. You've just beaten South Africa, and you are Ireland, of course. What do? You don't change 6-7 players. You just keep the pressure on unless you got injuries. I'm surprised they have made so many changes. The first one is Craig Gilroy coming in for Keith Earls, making it an all-Ulster back 3, which is an interesting decision to make. We also have Olding coming on for Marshall in the midfield, a change at inside centre. Furlong coming on for Ross in the front row, one of the prop changes there. We also have Quinn Roux making his first start. He replaces the injured Stander, but then moves to 4, which means Henderson from 4 will move to 6, so he plays on the blind side. And then we have Ruddock coming on for Geordie Murphy at 7. So a lot of changes here, and in key positions as well, which is kind of odd. Gilroy for Earls, I can kind of see an Ulster back 3, I think will perform very well because they know each other's game in 3 positions that need to have good communication between them as well, covering the fullbacks and the wings. But it's the changes in the back row that are going to be the most interesting. Roux, Henderson, Ruddock. How are they going to come into this game and really make an impact? Devon Toner, of course, he'll stay partnering Roux in the second row. But the change here, what are we going to see? A more physical game from the likes of Ruddock and Henderson than we've seen from Murphy and Stander. I think the red card and suspension to Stander really has changed the whole thought process for Ireland as they come into this game. But this is a massive chance here, and they really need to put out their best team. Is it a good time to give a guy his first cap? I'm not too sure. That's what's going to be important to me, is how Roux starts this match, how he plays this full game, and what impact he has on the team. I know it's only a second rower, but they still have a very important job to make. Henderson at 6, I'm a huge fan of Ian Henderson. I think he is one of the best players in the Irish team. Does his role very well, very strong runner, good defender as well, and I think his impact at 6 could be a little more seen than it is in the second row as well. So that's the changes. Ireland coming along with a number of them. What's that? 6 changes altogether. 5 personnel, 1 positional, of course. That's a big lot of changes to make to a team that performs so well, but they're really putting their faith in these reserves, changing the dynamic of the back row and looking to not be predictable. Because, of course, South Africa would have studied that game like nothing else, and they'll know exactly how Ireland would have played in their first match, how to combat it. But I think Ireland have gone around the bush a bit, and they'll be playing a different kind of game, a different style, and trying to catch those South Africans out. Now I'm going to go for the interesting pick once again. South Africa to get the win, 28-26 over Ireland. What a series this could be if it goes in the third and final test. I'd love to see Ireland win, and I'm kind of going to be watching that game, quietly backing the Irish to get a big result, because that is going to be absolutely monumental if they can get the win over South Africa. But I think South Africa will be too good, as they should be, throughout the whole series. But a decider will really play on those nerves, and it'll be a real interesting match. If we can get two week 3 deciders, you know, it's going to be a fantastic tour of rugby down to the Southern Hemisphere. Alright, that wraps me up. A late, but nevertheless still making your way preview of this weekend's matches. I hope you all enjoy your rugby out there. Let me know your thoughts, of course, in the comments. But, of course, I'll be on Twitter throughout the matches going on this weekend. So be sure to give me a shout-out on there and have your say what's going on, and have a bit of banter going on Twitter. It's always great fun as well. So catch me up on there. It's at Cornflakes Crypto. Join the crew on there and have a bit of a yarn to everyone during match time. But until next time, thanks for tuning and watching. I'll see you for the review next week. Until then, take care.